Welcome, Namaste, Sasrikal, and from me a universal greeting of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You are watching India from Partition to Persecution, a show brought to you by MEND, which is Muslim Engagement and Development. Muslim Engagement and Development is a community-based organization based here in the UK, and we are passionate in tackling Islamophobia in all its shape and form. We work with the Muslim community and the wider community to tackle all forms of hate and hopefully eliminate or alleviate the sufferings of millions of people around the world. My name is Shoka Adam Patel, and I will be joined by two esteemed guests today to discuss a subject matter that is close to literally billions of people around the world. India is a land that evokes images that are both brutal and beautiful. It is a land of snow-capped mountains, and it's also a land that has miles and miles of scorching deserts. It is a land that hosts one of the most iconically beautiful buildings in the world in the Taj Mahal, but it's also a land that homes millions of people that live in self-built shanty towns. It is a world which boasts trillionaires that don't feel out of place in Forbes' richest people's list, and it's also a land where close to 250 million of its people live under $2 a day. It is a land that gave us one of our first ever elected female prime ministers. It's also a land, according to human rights reports, a woman is raped every 15 minutes. It is a land that even those that, like myself, who no longer were not even born there or are separated by generations, find a draw to it. You know, there's a cultural draw, there's a spiritual draw, there's an emotional draw, and it's universally known as Mother India. Modern day India came into existence in 1947, unshackling itself from the chains of its colonial masters. This was after close to 200 years of subjugation in some parts of the country. This was not before a farewell gift, if you may, where India was carved into two: Pakistan for a Muslim majority and India for a Hindu majority. This partition was a cause of unimaginable horrors. I am aware most of you who are listening into this show will be aware of the displacement of close to 15 million people and the death of close to or just over 1 million people. If partition was the darkest part of the night before the new dawn, then the vision of the four parents of India, the four founders of India, was a bright new dawn that was for every single human being that lived in that country. This vision was drawn by two groups of individuals. One was staunch anti-imperialists. They did not like anything that colonialism stood for, and there were those in that group that were staunch social justice individuals who really wanted to see social justice for each and every citizen of the country, regardless of color, creed, caste, race, or religion. Look, democracy is undoubtedly a work in progress. But what we are going to explore in this show with my two guests that I will introduce you very, very shortly is that 73 years after partition, how are the vision of the forefathers going on? How is the forefathers' vision being represented now? Now, where do the minorities, the Muslim communities, and all the other minority communities find themselves being treated in modern day India? So what we'll be exploring in this show is what is actually happening to minorities, and what and how did we get here? And most importantly for me is what can we do about it? And finally, what lessons here in the West can we learn? India is the world's fifth largest democracy. India is the fifth largest economy. India is indeed the world's largest democracy. What happens in India affects millions of people, and what happens in India affects the rest of the world. To discuss this, I would like to introduce to you my two guests, and let me begin by saying how honored and grateful we are that both of you have taken some time out to join us this morning. First of all, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Janice MANISHA MAGANJI. Dr. MANISHA is a human rights crusader. She also happens to be a doctor. When she isn't a doctor, she also happens to be a pharmaceutical engineer of some sort of nature, and also she's also a filmmaker. She's also a mother of two beautiful children, she tells me, or two beautiful human beings. And in relation to this show, she's also the founder and the president of International Network Democratic Indians Abroad, which just happens to spell India. I'm sure that was completely and utterly coincidental, Dr. Manisha. Dr. Manisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And we also have my second guest, who is CJ WERLEMAN. CJ is the author of several books, from Quran to Curious and Crucifying America. He's a freelance journalist, writing for publications like the Byline Times and the Middle Eastern Eye. And his speciality is often investigating areas of conflict and terrorism. CJ, with a background like that, I'm sure we're going to see you on Fox News very soon. But I'd like to say it's an absolute personal pleasure to have you on the show, albeit a little envious that you are in Australia, which I'm sure has got much sunnier climes than us here in the United Kingdom. CJ, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
So before we dive into what I can promise you will be an extremely insightful show, I would like to begin by playing a trailer of a documentary that has been produced by Dr. Manisha's film company, Shatterproof Productions. The Blame Game, the name of the film, is a raw and unapologetic look at how the recent COVID-19 pandemic has been weaponized to demonize Muslims and other minorities in India. So let's have a look at the trailer.
The Tablighi is super spreader of India.
Scapegoating is an act of blaming the victim. It is an act of blaming an easy target for something bad that they are not responsible for.
Minorities and migrants have often been described in terms of infection and contagion.
Indian Muslims are essential to the project of Hindutva because they need you to constantly demonize you and scapegoat you.
At the forefront of the hate parade are right-wing parties and organizations. They were quick to blame the religious groups like the Muslim Tablighi Jamaat for the spread of the coronavirus across the country.
Usually, it happens in times of crisis. They are chosen as scapegoats because they are easy targets.
Television channels and social media showed fake videos of Muslims breaking lockdown guidelines and social distancing norms.
We continue to target a specific community and we don't even realize what sort of implications this will have. That is, when you target a community in the times of the pandemic.
After asking my name, they said, "You're a Muslim, you've destroyed the country, you've spread coronavirus."
The scapegoating of Tablighi Jamaat was not scapegoating of Tablighi Jamaat. Scapegoating was all Muslims.
We are protesting state-sanctioned pogroms that have killed minorities in Delhi. We are protesting blatant fascism.
If there is one culprit in India responsible for what we are going through as a nation in an aggravated manner, accept it or not, like it or not, it is the Tablighi Jamaat markers.
Dr. Manisha, that was an extremely powerful, emotive piece of cinema that you have created. The first question that I would like to ask you is simply why you felt the need to make this film.
Well, as soon as the COVID-19 situation started in India, and it was a great thing that they recognized it quite early and they locked down the country quite quickly, which was a very positive step. But soon after that, there was attacks on minorities, mainly the Muslims and the Dalits, that started preventing them from actually getting themselves the same rights that everybody else had to protect themselves and their families from COVID, get treated in case they were infected, and stay safe in the houses. And what was happening was that the Muslims, especially the small traders, the vegetable vendors, when they were going out to sell the vegetables, which was supposedly going to get the money for the day's meal for their families, they were attacked and they were brutalized and they were thrown out of the places where they were selling the vegetables. And
जो सब्जी वाले हैं, जो ठेले लेके आते हैं, लारी लेके आते हैं, आप उनसे सब्जी मत लीजिए, क्योंकि वो लोग सब्जी लेकर आते हैं और आपकी. It
quickly turned into a very communal thing, and they started to say openly with impunity that the COVID is being brought in the country by the Muslims. And the images that we were getting, the videos that we were getting were horrific. And in the organization, and by the way, I just want to also add here that the film was initiated and produced by the organization International Network of Democratic Indians Abroad, and it was commissioned to Shatterproof Production. Therefore, it became a joint production. So the people of this organization, we were, horrified like anybody else probably. And we, one of our members of our organization, Dr. Leila Kariwal, did a bit of research on this. And through her research, we realized that every pandemic in the history of the world, the minorities are scapegoated. So the pandemic was blamed on the minorities wherever it was convenient and possible and served the political purpose. And that's exactly what was happening in India, because we were seeing that the Muslims, and especially the Muslims and the Dalits, are being, brutalized and scapegoated for any given reason in India for the last at least 6 years. So we decided that this story needs to come to the world. People need to know what's going on, because of course, to stop this from happening, because when people stand up against these atrocities, great things happen. But also B, when the policymakers prepare for pandemics, and we know that COVID is going to last long, and we also hear there'll be other viruses that might be coming our way, there'll be more pandemics. So at least the policymakers, when they prepare for pandemics, they not just prepare for medical emergencies, they also prepare for these social issues. They prepare and they prepare for in a way that protects the minorities. And that's why we made this film. And we thought it was important for us to take the step, because in India, the situation is such that the real stories are not coming out because of the intimidation from the government at this stage. And for the last 5-6 years, we are saying. So an honest information and story needed to be out, and we just went ahead and did that.
Fantastic. It is an extremely graphic documentary, and I would urge everybody, when it is released fully, to go and watch it. CJ, I'd just like to come to you now. The award-winning turned activist writer Arunachari Roy has described the situation in India as approaching genocidal. Would you agree with this statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, first of all, Manisha, congratulations on that video you've put together. It's very powerful, very moving, and I hope a lot of people see it, because it's a strikingly important message that needs to be heard wide. And to your question, the situation in India, I agree, is approaching genocidal. The groundwork has been laid for years. I mean, you have the BJP political party and RSS, which gives BJP its ideological DNA, if you will, has been explicit and overt in its desire to turn India into a Hindu Russia, where non-Hindu minorities are forcibly expelled from the country, and we've from the courts to the police officer to thugs in the street. This agenda is being carried out. The Supreme Court's ruling on the Barbary Mosque has made clear, has sent a clear message to the rest of the country that there's no space for Muslim life in India. No doubt over the preceding years, we'll see further mosques demolished and destroyed.
तो हम भी अपनी ताकत दिखाना जानते हैं, हम भी हिंदुस्तान के नागरिक हैं और हम एकजुट होकर इस बार राम मंदिर की लड़ाई आर या पार करके ही रहेंगे. जय श्री राम.
We have members of the India's ruling party openly referring to Muslims in genocidal terms, including traitors, pest, terrorists, and vermin. These kind of terms send a message that Muslims are a nuisance that need to be expelled. And to the documentary, we're seeing that ramped up with the arrival of COVID-19. Whereas in more recent times, we've seen Muslims portrayed as a dangerous outsider that's fueled by Pakistani militant groups for radical Islam, through Islamabad-trained fighters who come into the country and carry out terrorist attacks in Kashmir or in India itself. The coronavirus was able to, Hindu nationalists to be able to shift that narrative and portray Muslims to be an enemy from within. And what like happened, I guess, in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the Jews in the years leading up to the Holocaust were portrayed as a virus, as disease carriers, and we're seeing the same thing happen in India for Muslims. So Muslims, there was a couple of narratives which formed around Muslims with the arrival of COVID-19, and that was that Muslims believed, were portrayed to believe that they were immune from virus because of their religious faith, and therefore were spreading the virus deliberately. And this coalesced with an out-of-control social media landscape in India, particularly with apps like WhatsApp, which furthered these rumors that Indian Muslims were spitting on produce, Muslim waiters were spreading the COVID-19 virus on cutlery in restaurants. We saw it resulted in a spike in hate crimes. And bearing in mind, COVID-19 sort of hit India around about early March. In February, we had the New Delhi riots, which resulted in 51 Muslims being massacred by Hindu extremists, which were riled up by a BJP leader in northeast Delhi. So this came shortly after that. So the climate had already been set. So this became another excuse to vilify Muslims as a dangerous threat to India's social fabric. And there's no doubt, coming back full circle to your question, there's no doubt anybody who doesn't believe that 200 million Muslims in that country are on the brink of genocide or the brink of ethnic cleansing hasn't been paying attention. And it's no secret because members of India's ruling party don't make it a secret. They're very open about the desire to rid the country of Muslims within the next decade or two.
So the ground was fertile and COVID-19 just accelerated the process by the sounds of what you're saying. Dr. Manisha, just want to follow on from what CJ said. He spoke mostly about the atrocities being committed against the Muslim community. I mean, there's lots of other minority communities in India. Are they suffering in a similar vein?
Yes. Well, basically, anybody who is showing dissent and who is not following the Hindutva agenda is suffering. So it did start with the Muslims, and Muslims were easy target. But of course, the Christians have been targeted for a very long time, and it has got intensified in recent years. And it has always been there wherever BJP has ruled. So like for example, in Gujarat, when Modi was the chief minister, the Christians were oppressed there also. There were churches, 7-8 churches that were burnt. There were villages burnt wherever there were Christians. It's very much happening in Orissa, in Assam, in Madhya Pradesh, in Chhattisgarh, Uttar Pradesh. So Christians are being oppressed they don't have a reason to do that, but they say that Christians are converting people. And so they use anywhere where there are Christian people meeting and praying, they are being attacked, and pastors are being attacked and killed. And it doesn't feel safe to Christian people in the same way as the Muslim people don't feel safe to live in India. Other than that, we know that the Dalits are being oppressed. So in Hindu culture, the Hinduism is made up of casteism. You cannot separate the two things. But the Hindutvavadi people who are actually, and by the way, I'd like to really differentiate here to people who are listening and who do not understand the difference between Hindutva and Hinduism.
I think that's a very important point you make there, Dr. Manisha. Thank you.
Yes, whilst we know that Hinduism is a religion which we have lived with, we have grown up with Hindu people, and Hinduism is a religion which believes in one God. So they have various versions of gods, but they believe that all the gods are one God. So in a sense, you can call them monolithic as well. And this is a religion which has taught tolerance. So they accept and endorse all gods. That is what Hinduism stands for. And they have been tolerant, and I have grown up in the country. Whereas Hindutva is the use of this Hindu religion for political reasons. So it's the politicization of the religion itself. So, pretty much where, in Middle Eastern countries, or some of those countries where Islam was used for radicalization and for radical purposes, in the same way, because there is the majority of the public in India, population in India is following Hindu religion, they use the religion for their political gains. So,
would that be, Dr. Manisha, stop to interrupt you there, but for example, we hear about cow vigilante groups. Is this an example of weaponizing the Hindu religion in order to attack minorities and other faith groups?
Yes, I mean, if you think of it, they have actually weaponized the religion, and not just that, they have radicalized the people. And there are young people who are trained to hate Muslims, feel proud that they don't have Muslim friends. They are taught how to use swords and knives. They are taught that it's okay to kill somebody who disrespects their religion.
कि अगर एक हिंदू का खून बहेगा तो एक हिंदू के खून के बदले आने वाले समय में हम प्रशासन से एफआईआर दर्ज नहीं करवाएंगे, बल्कि कम से कम 10 ऐसे लोगों की हत्या उससे करवाएंगे जो लोग
And their definition of disrespect can be anything. If you don't say Jai Shri Ram, which is supposed to be, when I was growing up, Jai Shri Ram was a greeting, just like you would say Salaam Alaikum, or you would say good morning, you would say Jai Shri Ram. And people, and a Muslim or a Christian would respond with a Jai Shri Ram to people. But now they have made Jai Shri Ram as a war cry. So when they need to punish somebody, they say Jai Shri Ram.
Bol. Jai Shri Ram. Altara bol. और एक बार बोल बेबो जय श्री राम और एक बार बोल जय श्री राम जय हनुमान बोल जय हनुमान.
And then if you don't say it, or even so they hit you, they kill you. So they have weaponized Hindutva, and Dalits are suffering because Dalits have always been at the lowest end of the receiving end of the Hindu religion. And for that reason, they've never had equal rights. They've never felt equal, and there has been discrimination for as long as we know Hinduism.
So has this become worse recently, or has this always been the case?
Yeah. So in the recent years, it has become worse because the Hindus of the Hindutva ideology take great pride in Hinduism, and Hinduism is having casteism, so they need to accentuate everything that is Hinduism.
So what would be your answer to the question, Dr. Manisha, if from the Hindutva narrative that the Christians have their land, the Muslims have their land, this is for Hindus, so therefore we should have our land? What would be your answer to that?
Well, India has never been a land for Hindus. You know, India has been occupied and lived in by diverse backgrounds of people. And there is still also a controversy around Hinduism, because Hinduism, many Hindus believe, is a way of life. And yes, they believe in religions, but it is actually a way of life. It's a culture. And this is what they take advantage of, that they try to mix the culture with the religion. And so if, like, for example, if there's a Muslim person or a Christian person or a Dalit person, we have an Indian culture. And what they are saying is that Indian culture stands for Hinduism, which is not true. Hinduism is a separate religion and Indian culture is different. And Indian culture has had people of various backgrounds living in it and flourishing in there. So yes, they do want to create a land for Hindus alone, but you cannot create a land for Hindus alone out of a land which is owned by people of diverse backgrounds. So India can never be and should never be a land of one religion alone. It will be disastrous.
मुसलमान तो इस देश के अंदर रहना नहीं चाहिए. उन्होंने जनसंख्या के आधार पर देश का बंटवारा कर लिया, तो फिर यहाँ इस देश के अंदर रहने की क्या आवश्यकता थी? फिर उनको अलग भूभाग दे दिया गया, बांग्लादेश या पाकिस्तान जाए.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Misha. I mean, we've touched briefly upon the atrocities that are going on in India. Obviously, you've seen the trailer, and CJ's also mentioned from top down, it seems, the atrocities that have been committed against minorities and Muslims. I'd just like to move on now and like to explore how we've got here. Because as I mentioned in my introduction, the vision of the forefathers for India was very, very different. The counter argument that you hear is that they weren't representative of the whole of India. That was their view. But, you know, we hear Mahatma Gandhi, who quoted as saying that, you know, India will only be free not when only Muslims and Hindus are brothers, but when everybody is brothers and sisters in the land. So everybody's treated respected equally. And Nehru, from his prison cell, which he was put there by his benevolent imperialists, he used to write letters saying that when his new India will be formed, it will be completely different to the Western colonialism concepts of hierarchy and leadership. But we are where we are at the moment. And what I would like to ask CJ first, that, you know, after the Gujarati massacres, Narendra Modi was a political pariah. You know, he was a hot potato. He was banned from the United Kingdom. He was banned from the United States. He has gone from this pariah to a rock star. I mean, he fills out stadiums wherever he goes. I mean, I'm sure there's most Western leaders would give to have half of his popularity. How do you account for his popularity and his rising power?
Well, he's tapped into, you know, the political spirit of the day, which is right-wing populism, which is a very inward ideology which celebrates, you know, the middle class and the working class at the expense of traditional ruling elites, at the expense of intellectual expertise, you know, and elites writ large. He's tapped in and he's used Hindu nationalism. He's weaponized it in a way that has made Hindutva, I guess, somewhat as a revolt of the upper castes against, you know, what would be the egalitarian demands of democracy. It's what he's doing is latching on to a project which says that India can be made India can return to its glory days or its imagined glory days on the back of scapegoating, you know, non-Hindu and lower caste minorities. It's the same trick used by Donald Trump in the United States, who has taken traditional leftist alliances or, you know, traditional left voting blocks and turned them into, you know, rabid right-wing hyper-nationalists, which are voting for the political parties that would traditionally vote, that would traditionally elect, were traditionally favoured by their bosses. We've seen that in the United Kingdom as well. So the old northern industrial areas, which were traditional voting blocks of the Labour Party, are now voting for right-wing political parties because they feel that the ever-changing world through globalization, the fast-paced world we now inhabit because of shorter transport times, the ability to offshore work and outsource work more easily, has left these voting blocks behind, and they're latching onto people which are political entrepreneurs which are selling a form of false hope, instead of explaining how globalization has changed our economies forever. They're saying that we can return back to glory days by getting rid of a certain otherized minority. In the UK, that is Turkish and Polish migrants and Pakistani migrants. In the USA, Trump is vilifying Hispanic migrants and Muslims and so forth, and saying that jobs will magically reappear. The salaries will suddenly start to climb again if these certain otherized minorities are removed from the country. And that's what Modi is doing, and it's working very successfully. People have to remember that unemployment is at a 45% high in India, and in the Indian economy is in decline for the first time in years. But his popularity remains the same. Trump's popularity has remained the same with his base, because it's not the it's not the they still see Modi as that this project is going to take time, and if they can just get rid of Muslims and Christians and Dalits and so forth, then these more prosperous times will be revisited upon them.
Okay, so Dr. Manisha, CJ's given us the impression that Modi is just part of this right-wing global movement that we're seeing at the moment, from Argentina to the USA to possibly even our country here. Would it be fair to say, Dr. Manisha, that he has delivered on a lot of his promises? In terms of economics, in terms of electrifying the villages, sanitization, health insurance, bank accounts, etc., etc. Was there a vacuum that was left for him? The 70s, 80s, were there wasted decades in India? And he has said, look, these guys have wasted your money. I'm going to make a difference to you.
Well, I will give very short points on this one. India the poverty in India has raised by 23% in the last 6 years. That speaks a lot. I remember there was, during Mrs. Gandhi's time, during Rajiv Gandhi's time, we were talking about garibi se rekha ki rekha se upar uthana, like pulling people over the margin of poverty. And they were successfully doing that. What we got from the colonization of British, what the kind of India we got after the partition, was in tatters. We didn't have dams, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have nothing. India was brought in the last 65 years to a state where we were competing with China, where we were heading towards being the fastest growing economy. And we were the second after China as the future of the world. And this has changed. 40 million migrant workers. Can you imagine that figure? 40 million migrant workers were affected during COVID alone because of the short-sightedness of the government. Unemployment rate has increased. It is at its highest in the last 45 years. So I don't know when people say that Modi has great policies. If a country cannot bring its poor people up, then it's a total failure, in my opinion. Because yes, there have been millionaires like Ambani's, and those who have left the country with a lot of money. The banks have been vacated by siphoning the money out of the banks, the public money, by these people, and they've left the country. Yes, they have definitely progressed. Their millions worth has increased. But the poor people, there are 23% more poor people in the country now. So that, I don't think by any parameters is progress. The GDP is the lowest since 2000. So we were climbing our GDP. And I know, I grew up in that country. I know by 2005, 2007, I could see that we were doing so well. And then what is it now? The GDP is the lowest ever. in the country. So I don't see the hunger index. We are out of 117 countries, we are 110 at the lowest hunger index. So where is
everything's not glittering in Modi's India?
Everything's not glittery. To your point, I wanted to add to the point I said before about the country. You said, asked me about, who is being oppressed. One point I want to say about the Muslims: when the country was partitioned, we had a choice. The country had a choice to be a nationalistic, a singular religion country. Pakistan made that choice, and Pakistan became a Muslims-only country. The Muslims living in India had a choice to go to Pakistan and be in a Muslim-only country. They chose to remain in the secular India. So India was designed, by design, a secular country, and the Muslims of India have chosen to be the secular path. So, I just remembered that this is one point that must be mentioned. And to your point about the oppression, ordinary people, day-to-day people, students, journalists, judges, IPS officers who are working honestly, they are all oppressed. Why? Because they do not agree with certain policies of the government. This was never like that in our country. We had democracy, we were able to speak, we had freedom of speech. People like me who are sitting abroad, I'm sitting in the UK feeling too much pained to see the state of the country. And especially for me, the people of India is India. For me, India is nothing else. But if the people of India are suffering, then India is suffering. So I write on Facebook, I write on Twitter, I have made films, I have spoken to people, I do activities that can be done in any democratic country. But, I have been penalized, I have been attacked. Only a few months ago, somebody took out my pictures, they took out my old comments, and they created a meme, and there was so much hate campaign going on against me, just because I want to do something good for the country.
Manisha, I want you to hold that thought, because we will be coming back to that very poignant point you are making. That is extremely, very, very important, and we will be coming back to that. I just want to go back to something CJ said earlier. He spoke about how this was a state-exploited situation to demonize a minority and othering a minority. That's one of the reasons why we have got to the situation why we have. It's just part of a right-wing populist movement that we're seeing around the world. But CJ, I just want to go and speak to you a little bit about your profession and what role journalism has played in creating this fertile ground for so much hatred. You mentioned in your first answer historically about the Nazi propaganda machine, which made it so much easier for people to turn a blind eye against the atrocities that were being committed to the Jewish people. We see recently in the 90s in Rwanda, where within 100 days, close to 1 million Hutus were massacred. And when this was investigated, it was found that the two radio stations of that country, Radio Rwanda and Radio TLM, played a very, very big role. What role do you think that the media is playing in India in creating this narrative?
Well, to use an analogy, I mean, if we look at the United States, you see the influence that Fox News has on creating a hyper-polarized political society, just through the level of sheer propaganda and toxic discourse that pumps across its airwaves, on a 24/7 basis. Equally, in the United Kingdom, you guys are very familiar with the toxic and polarizing influence that Murdoch-owned media, newspapers, and outlets have in the United Kingdom there. Well, if you think the Murdoch-owned media in the United Kingdom or the United States is bad, then you haven't been to India. It's like having 3 dozen equivalents of Fox News running 24/7 in that country, all parroting the Modi's agenda, all operating effectively as like state media outlets for BJP, and latching on and weaponizing Islamophobic discourse, totally uninterrupted. It's this never-ending streaming. These segments make their way obviously into social media, so they're further amplified. So yeah, I mean, you're seeing a total normalization of anti-Muslim hatred in India on a scale that we haven't seen before. And if we, to use the example again of Nazi Germany, well, the Nazis demonized the Jewish people through newspapers, the odd radio station here and there, but now we're seeing it through mass media on a scale which is unprecedented. And you know, Indian society's social cohesion is collapsing under that weight. You know, the space for you know, liberal Hindu Indian citizens is becoming ever smaller. As the
where is the
politics of
voice
extreme
for the
become.
minorities, CJ? Sorry to interrupt you. From the international community, I mean, I haven't seen as much traction on these stories as I would have expected. How do you account for that? If it's happening in India, you're saying we can understand, but where's the international community?
Yeah, it's the international news media is falling short woefully, and it's just, you know, the COVID-19 has exacerbated that. You'll find that editors and publishers really are so concentrated on stories which are either built around the US election, the consequences of COVID-19 in their own countries, and the economic and you know, the dire economic situation that these countries are the respective countries are dealing with. So a story which comes across or is pitched at an editor or a publisher, as do with India, is gaining little traction. We saw the same dynamic for the Syrian civil war for the last 8 years. There's so much, the world is besieged by so much ethnic cleansing, genocide. Look what's happening in China, Myanmar, India. If you scream at an editor that India is on the brink of or Muslims are on the brink of genocide, they're going to roll their eyes. And the only reason they're going to roll their eyes is they know their audience is going to roll their eyes or turn the page or change the channel. It is just not a high priority for, you know, for-profit news corporations, which are dependent on, you know, attracting eyeballs and keeping eyeballs for to keep their advertising revenues flowing.
You know, I think it was Paul Draker, the Daily Mail editor, that said we just print stories that people want to read. So what comes first? Is it the stories? Or is the
Well, you know, that's what the media does. You know, the media only reflects people's preferences back to them and the public's preferences back to them. You know, the media outlets don't sell what the public isn't buying, and so they have a good, you know, the finger on the pulse as to where the public's fears and concerns are. And at the moment, you know, what's happening in India, you know, ranks very low in their view.
Dr. Manisha, in this research I looked up, and it appears that the BJP have purchased 53% of all the media space across print and electronic media in India before elections. In our trailer that we saw in the beginning, we see a news anchorman literally shouting at the camera. You know, he's got a specific style about him, and he's shouting to the camera. He's telling everybody, the millions that are listening to him, that it was the Muslim community, and in particular a certain section of the Muslim community, that was responsible for spreading the virus. What sway and what influence do individuals like him and his news channel have to the normal people of India?
Well, I think it has a huge influence on the ordinary people. See, in India, there is so much, there are so many people who cannot read and write. There are so many people who are uneducated, but also those who are educated, they're not educated in the right sense. They have degrees, but they don't have an understanding, because the education system has gone down the drain as well, as we know. So it is very easy to influence these people, because they speak of things as if that has happened. They speak as if they have made the decision. They speak. So, for example, you know, they bring up topics that don't need the coverage at that stage, because there are topics that need to be talked about: employment, about poverty, about education, you know, about health. And these topics are never covered. And these channels and these people, these journalists who are the tools of the government, they are used to highlight some non-issues to cover up the issues that should be talked, that should be covering the space of the mind of the common man. So yes, it does affect, and it also influences it. It affects the way they think, it affects the way they act. And how do you think these mob lynchings happen? These mob lynchings happen because of the instigation of these people. Every time there is a rape happening, they will, if it is a Muslim man included, they will say it's been done by a Muslim man. Every time there is a crime done by a Muslim person, they will say Muslim, or by a Christian person, they will say Christian. And if the rapist or a perpetrator is a Hindu man, the whole of the government system stands together, stands for the protection of the Hindu man, creating a communal hatred. And quickly, any crime, anything quickly translates into a Hindu and a Muslim or a communal issue. In fact, recently in one newspaper, they published, there's a Muslim child who topped in NEET exam. NEET is a competitive exam in India, and I don't understand, but I know it's quite a big exam which takes them to professional courses. And a Muslim kid topped it. The newspaper heading was, the Hindu child's name was some Sharma, for example, Rohit Sharma, whatever. Our Rohit Sharma came fourth. Our Rohit Sharma stood fourth, whereas the Muslim boy's name stood first. Why do you have to put the word our in front of the Muslim child? Because the children are Indian children and all are our children. We need to celebrate everybody's success. So it's not just the TV channels, it's even the print media. Yeah. You know, it's the WhatsApp. WhatsApp is spreading so much communal hatred. You know, they have thousands and thousands of people they have hired as their the government, the BJP, I would say. They have hired these people, create memes, they create stupid messages, they create funny messages, whether it is to bring down the opposition party leader, convert him into a clown by saying same thing a million times, people start believing it, or it is to spread the communal hatred. Everything goes via WhatsApp. In fact, so many lynchings have happened due to WhatsApp messaging. So people have sent, a rumor, and that rumor gets spread, and then they catch the person and they kill the person. So any kind of media, I mean, they have a huge
media is playing a
influence.
part, as CJ is saying, othering other communities in creating this partition 73 years after we had the partition of
Yes,
saying
and
our person, or our Hindu boy. It's really depressing to hear that.
And the government is not doing anything to prevent it.
So we've established it's a top-down problem that we've had here. So we've spoken a little bit about the situation on the ground, very briefly, of how we've got here. What I'd like to move on now is possibly the most important thing. So for our listeners, for our viewers, is what can you do about it? What can I do about it? You've heard about the crusade almost that Dr. Manisha is on. You've heard about CJ, who is in Australia, who probably, I may be wrong, may not have any links to India, family-wise, etc. Yet he's putting himself out there in highlighting the issues. So now what I want to go very quickly into is, what can we do about it here? Because it's enough and especially my community, we read about it, we shake our heads, and then we just carry on. What's for dinner? So what can we do about it? So CJ, I'd like to start with you. There's a quote attributed to a Russian opposition leader that says, "Speaking truth to power is fraught with difficulty and danger." So when renowned world organizations like Amnesty is banned from India, okay, on whatever charges that were made against them, what can individuals like myself or other people listening to this show do about what's happening in India?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of networks and coalitions which are building at the grassroots level, which are setting about to expose Hindutva organizations and the spread of their disinformation and their hate, the kind of networks that they affiliate through from corporate funding through to front organizations in the United States or Australia and elsewhere throughout the Indian diaspora. You'll find that there's, and I'm working actually with a civil rights group we're very much at the ground floor at the moment of putting together the equivalent of a BDS campaign and boycott, divest, sanction movement against RSS affiliated organizations and organizations and corporations that fund RSS and other Hindutva organizations. There's several of them. So you'll see that activists, human rights activists, and NGOs are galvanizing in a way to put to try and exact an economic cost on India continuing to go down this path. And so, yeah, I mean, you'll find more about that, and I'm sure this information will be shared with you guys soon. But for individuals, it's being a part in social media. You'll find social media groups and individuals are bringing awareness and exposing these financial ties that these groups have. I think there's been great work done as far as when Tulsi Gabbard ran for the Democratic presidential primary in 2020. Great work was done to expose the kind of financing and funding that she receives from several Hindutva organizations in India, and how these organizations spread their tentacles for the United States. That wasn't the only reason which brought her campaign undone, but it certainly did play a role in showing what sort of ties she has to one of the most pernicious fascist organizations on the planet at the moment. So yeah, that's these things are happening, and people like me can get behind it. People in non-Indian countries can do likewise.
CJ, how do people get in contact with you if they wish to and join and assist you in your work?
Yeah, I mean, they can follow me on Twitter or Facebook at CJ WERLEMAN. Another thing that I've done personally myself is I've been compiling a database which compiles hate crimes which are carried out by Muslims. It's up to date for the last 2 years, and I'm working backwards at the moment to 2018 and 2017. A lot of the information comes from other activists, other journalists who send me links and information of attacks or hate crimes which have been carried out about Muslims in the country. And I know I'm not the only one who's doing projects like this. I know other anti-hate groups have tried to do the same. Maybe haven't got to the same level at the moment, but yeah, there is a growing awareness. It might not be being covered in the media as much as we would like, but social, human rights activists around the world are doing their very best to bring light and expose, the perils that 200 million Muslims in India face at the moment.
Okay. Manisha, I alluded to the fact that it's a very difficult situation, and CJ reiterated that. We've heard of journalists that have unfortunately been murdered in the case of Gauri Lankesh, who had spoken repeatedly against the government. Police officers who have spoken against Modi have found themselves in prison on old charges. Haran Pandya, who was a BJP minister who was actually charged with murder, attempted murder and conspiracy after the Ayodhya and the riots that happened after that. As soon as the BJP came in, it was set free, and all her charges were reversed. What can we do from afar, and how can we assist the people in India to tackle these injustices?
Yeah, sure. Well, whatever is happening in India, there are many people who give an excuse, including the UN. Organizations like UN give an excuse that it's an internal matter of the country. It is not, because it's a human rights issues now. It's not about policies. It's not just about the political scenario. It's affecting human beings, and it's a human rights issue. So therefore, everybody, not just the Indians or the people of Indian origin, people like CJ, people who've got a heart outside India and who may not be Indian, they should also stand up, because imagine if the information about Germany, what is happening in Germany, had come 5 years before the World War II took place. So many lives would have been saved. in this day and time when we have the media, we have WhatsApp, we have information, we know what is going on in India. If the world doesn't do anything about it, then there is no excuse for us later on if big genocide, because India is heading towards genocide, if that is not prevented. Now what we can do, sitting outside, the smallest things to the biggest things, speak up, start speaking up, talk about it, spread the information, create discussions, help out the organizations, contact organizations like India, and there are so many organizations like CJ has mentioned who are trying to do great work, helping out by means of even £1 can help us a lot, because we need funds to do whatever we are doing. There are people who are involved full-time in doing this. At the moment we are doing things out of our pockets. A film was made out of we didn't have the money, but it was made, and now it's going to go on Netflix. Many people will know about it, and we need to start a movement to prevent this from happening. We cannot wait till something big happens to act on it.
And Dr. Manisha, I interrupted you earlier when you were telling me your journey into this mission and the challenges you face. You may want to pick up on that, and also how can people who are listening and watching assist your organization?
Yeah, sure. So for me, ever since this journey started, everybody who is an armchair warrior on Facebook or Twitter knows that they are attacked, which was normal, and I was being attacked. But now recently, for the last 3-4 months, the BJP's IT cell are making memes about me. They are digging out old posts. So for example, one of my friends had posted Independence Day something up for India, and a young lad from Pakistan said Jai Hind on her post, and I felt my heart was filled with gratitude for the guy, and I thought these are the young people who are going to remove hatred from not just India and Pakistan, but from the world. So in my emotional outburst, I responded to his Jai Hind with Pakistan Zindabad, which was the same as, exchanging greetings. And this was last year, I think.
It was a neighborly response, Dr. Manisha. It was just a neighborly response.
It was a neighborly response. And this is how we should be doing. Why should I only pray for the victory of my country where I'm born? I want the victory of UK, US, Belgium, France. I want the victory of all the countries. Everybody should be a winner. We don't want nobody to lose. Somalia, South Africa. There was a meme made for me. I got abuses, I got rape threats, I got death threats, I got threats on my kids, and all this went on for days just because of that. And that also was not recent. Somebody decided that Manisha is doing this work and we need to stop her. And so they went and dug some old posts. There was a picture of me with Rahul Gandhi many years ago. They pulled that out and put everything together. So there's so much hard work that goes on to oppress people. So, and it's just not just my personal experience. One of my friends, Sanjeev Bhatt, I told you in the past, Shokar Bhai, about that. He's the IPS officer. He's been behind bars for absolutely no reason. A case which he had dealt with or not dealt with when he was a police officer. So are you going to now?
It was apparently dormant for 2 decades, Dr. Manisha, and they just trumped it up again.
They did trump it up. Yes. So yeah, so that's what is happening. So for India, I would request anybody who is interested and who is listening to please join organizations, join our organization, help us out. We need hands. We are only a handful of people trying to do things. We have so much to do. So we need people, we need skill sets. So please contact me on my Facebook. I look at my messenger all the time, and I will be very keen to hear from people.
So the message from both of our guests today is to do something, join an organization, assist in any shape or form that you can. We are quickly running out of time, as always is the case. I want to very quickly and very briefly touch on the final point that I mentioned in my introduction, is what are the lessons we can learn globally from what is happening in India. CJ, you mentioned on a show that I was listening to that, and to quote yourself, powerful nation states have conspired against Muslim communities. We see this during COVID, to the extent that they've othered minorities, even in the city that I am from, Leicester, during the COVID, that it must be the ethnic minorities. It's due to the diverse natures of our cities. But if we go back to your quote that even powerful nation states have conspired against Muslim communities, what exactly did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think when I said that, I might have been referring to the situation in Bosnia at the moment for Bosnian Muslims. You have rising Serb nationalism, and you have Russia, which is fomenting that through disinformation and encouraging Srebrenica genocide denialism and genocide triumphalism. And I mean, you look anywhere in the world, and you'll find that Muslims have become an easy scapegoat for political entrepreneurs. You've seen that in the United Kingdom during Brexit. You've seen Boris Johnson do it. We see that with the elections in France at the moment, even before you had this terrorist attack on that school teacher there. Macron had decided that weaponizing fear against Islam and Muslims would be the cornerstone of his re-election strategy. Trump has done it in the United States. Myanmar has done it. They blamed invading Bengals, as they call the Rohingya, for that country's economic and social and political plight. It's a gift that keeps on giving to nefarious political entrepreneurs around the world. And it's probably
Do you
going
see
to
an end to it anytime soon, this working with the politics of fear?
Yeah, Muslims will continue to be that target, and for however long it keeps being successful. The minute it stops being a successful strategy, and then when people start to see through, just how empty a lot of these anti-Muslim tropes are, tropes that I've succumbed to the seduction of before in a former life more than a decade ago after witnessing a terrorist attack. When people can cut through and see that they are empty and they are vacuous, these tropes, then people, more and more the public won't fall trapped to these kind of individuals that profit on fear.
I suppose once they stop demonizing the Muslim, they'll find another minority group to pick on.
Yeah, and just and not to go down another rabbit hole, but now you have, ironically, Muslim majority, the leaders of Muslim majority countries now adding to global Islamophobia. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, they've now become two of the biggest peddlers of anti-Muslim hate in the world, and they're funding far-right groups in the United Kingdom, in Italy, in the United States, because they see that if they can make Muslims the object of security discourse, then Western societies and democracies will sympathize with their efforts to clamp down on political Islamist parties and Islamists and Muslims, conservative Muslims writ large.
And I think one of the skill sets of Modi we spoke about earlier is his relationship he has made with the Middle Eastern countries. I mean, he's the first prime minister in over 35 years to travel to these countries. He's managed to balance Iran and Saudi Arabia. He's been ordered and offered the highest order that the UAE can give to a foreign statesman. It was straight after the Kashmir injunction that was passed that Saudi Arabia awarded India a huge contract. So obviously they're playing a role in it.
And both these countries not only support India's Hindu settler colonial project in Kashmir, but they also support China's effort to ethnically cleanse the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, and publicly support that. So, so much for the Ummah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we will be going through another pigeonhole, and we are coming towards the end of the show. Dr. Manisha, what lessons do you think we can learn from what's happening in India to ensure it doesn't happen in our country here and around the world?
Well, I think call out the moment an individual is an individual, and I call an individual, don't wait for many people, but the moment an individual is oppressed or isolated for their identity, call it out, stop it right there and then, before it becomes from 1 to 2, 2 to 5 and 10 and so on. We already know that there are things happening in the UK, and there are communities. There is a Islamophobia, there is a hidden racism. Somewhere it is hidden, in some places it is out there and open, that's still existing. Call it out, stand up, but not just wait for somebody to call you victim and to protect you. Stand up for yourself, talk about it, because I know the victims of racism in the UK also feel ashamed of being victimized, of being oppressed or isolated for your identity, and that speak about it, talk about it, and confront the person who does it.
Thank you so much, Dr. We have run out of time, as always. CJ, do you have any last parting words before we end the show?
No, just to say thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed listening to Dr. Manisha's insights as well. And yeah, thank you for having this opportunity to talk about a very important topic.
And Dr. Manisha?
Thank you so much, Shaukat Bhai. It was lovely to hear, CJ, your thoughts. And you know, there are things that we might be working on common, and so it will be nice to catch up another time. But this was a wonderful platform Shaukat Bhai Mend has given to us, and I really appreciate that. And I hope people do watch it and you know, reach out and take action after this, because this is an initiative that Mend has taken. The initiative is not just to bring people and talk about it, but to motivate people to take action. And that's when we know that you know, there has been an impact, not just the reach.
Yeah, from behalf of MEND and from myself as well, thank you so much. You both have been extremely insightful, and we're very, very appreciative of the time that you have given. And to our listeners and to those that are watching this, you've heard how passionately Dr. Manisha and CJ WERLEMAN are about this issue and all global injustices. We have to get involved. It is not enough just to listen, and to prayers have always got a place in our lives. But we have to take action, and if we do not wish to be next, we have to support those on the other side of the world. So once again, Dr. Manisha, CJ, thank you so much for joining us. This is Shaukat Adam Patel on MAND platform, Muslim Engagement Development. Please join us for the work that we do in combating Islamophobia. And just leaves me to say thank you very much, and have a very pleasant day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.